What is up, my guy?
What is up, man? How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Yeah, doing so good. It's been an easy work week. Super
Nice.
easy, super simple. So,
Always good.
yeah, man. You look freshly cleaned up. What's up, dude? What's the occasion?
Yeah, I just had to get a haircut because I my hair grows obnoxiously fast. And so I my dad says I end up looking like a chia pet, so I got to get it. I got to get it cleaned up from time to time.
That's
Um
great.
and then there is a St. Brennan's recitation night tonight. So we're going to go see that and hang out,
Nice.
ice cream social afterwards, all the good things.
Heck yeah, man. Praise God. That's awesome.
Yep. What about you, Mr. Thompson? How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Trying to get my headphones connected here, but yeah, no, doing well. So getting started with the new work is slow, but fortunately ramping up.
Very
Nice,
good.
nice. What's the new job in?
I'm doing bookkeeping. So
Oh,
my
nice.
brother-in-law and sister-in-law own a bookkeeping company that they do kind of nationwide. They do heart cries and stuff like that. But I'm doing more the gym and dance side of it.
Man.
Sweet. Is that something you have experience with previously?
No, no, I don't. But they do some pretty good training, and I'm just kind of doing basic bookkeeping right now as I'm getting ramped up and doing some kind of admin stuff until I'm fully trained so I can get the hours.
Awesome. That's actually my wife has an accounting degree and worked at a tax firm for a little while, and then she sort of started her own small thing out of the house,
Mhm.
and man, like it can be surprisingly profitable if you end up finding that you enjoy it and kind of like it and decide to branch off and do your own thing. Like it's always shocking to me how easy it is for her to find clients, and it's really not a crazy amount of work once you know how everything goes, as far as time commitment anyways. And yeah, anyways, that's awesome. That is awesome. I don't know if we'll have anyone else hop on here. I have been wanting to smoke one of these cigars for like 2 days and I haven't had a chance. So
What you got there?
one of ours, I don't know
Heck
if
yeah.
that's gonna
Nice.
let me show that, but one of our Habanos.
Get it.
I think
That
this
thing
is
was
the
delicious, by the way.
I
It
was
was
just
so
gonna
nice.
say thank you. Um I have had I think this is the fourth one I've had. So I haven't been just smoking them constantly, but the last one that I had, the third one, was like one of the better cigars I've had recently. It was surprisingly good, which is always good when you don't like try your own product and go, ugh, like that's terrible.
That's right. Spend months doing that, and you're like, get it. You're like, I can't give this to the guys. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't recommend this to people. Like I don't like it. So thankfully, I can actually recommend our own cigars. So have you guys had a chance to work through this particular chapter?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was tough in the
I've
first two.
I was listening to it all day long, like trying to get my head wrapped around it, and then I came home to like glance through it again. I was like, man, like I have a couple like notes written down from certain lines, like just thinking, man, like like I'll give you an example, right? I have like line 283 in this chapter. He calls them to arms, right? And I was thinking to myself, man, do I have people that if I asked to come to arms, would they just come? Or like, do I have somebody who would ask that of me, and would I go for them?
Mm-hmm. Good questions to ask.
Yeah, dude. Something about Dan Burkholder had mentioned that in an episode of the King's Hall, and he just said, like, are you in a place that you want your sons to become like the men you're around, or are you in a place that you're not going to be ashamed of the people who bury you? I'm like, wow, dude. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, that's those heavy questions that you sort of have a hard time synthesizing, like getting them to crystallize where you can actually see them and deal with them. You know what he's talking about as soon as he says it. You're like, oh, that's the thing I've been thinking of, but I wasn't able to put it into words like that. Having those people around you that have been dealing with the same problem with that issue for some time, and then they've been able to work all the way through it and then can put words to it, is tremendously helpful, for sure. But anything else about the chapter that just like jumped out to you while we got a couple minutes waiting for anybody else to jump on?
Well, the other. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It was just kind of funny how at the very end, after everything, he just kind of throws in his dad's death, just like this side note out of nowhere. It's like, what? Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that for sure. We'll save it because if we start talking about it now, it's the only thing that we'll talk about. But we'll get there.
Yeah, it interesting and refreshing that that's like what you bring up, because we talked about that yesterday, Tate and I, for a while, and it like made a lot of sense to both of us. But I don't know. I'm in the back of my head. I'm always like, I don't know. My mind works a little bit different than most. But if there seems to be a theme that people are picking up on this, and there's clearly something worth talking about there.
Yeah, I also had another conversation. We had a men's book study last night. We finished the Return of the Strong Gods, and afterwards, I grabbed Ben Garrett and was like, "All right, talk through this particular portion of this chapter today with my buddy. We're gonna go over it with our guys tomorrow. Are we on the right track here? Like, what do you think?" And then we ended up spending over half an hour discussing fatherhood and like all of the mechanics around that event. So I think you're onto something. Let's just say it that way. Like I'm stoked that you noticed that. We'll definitely dig some more into it here in a minute.
And Ben was just able to, like, at the drop of a hat, be like, ah, yes, of course I know book 3 of the Aeneid.
It's scary. Like he's one of those people that if you don't want to be like imprisoned for something that you say, don't say it in front of him, because he will remember it for the rest of his, like, he remembers everything. It's freaking, his ability to remember words and phrases and like narrative lines is astonishing to me.
That's an impressive skill set to have, one that I certainly don't possess myself, but admirable.
I thought that I was pretty good at it. Like I was like, man, like if I can, honestly, with a book like this, I've read it a couple times. If you just let me start at the beginning and then like at each step, as soon as I remember the next step, I'll remember the next one. And I can I could probably just walk through and tell you the overview of most of the story without too much like resource digging type stuff. But like he remembers the exact words, like he remembers the line and like can tell you where it is and the context of it. And then also like there's this whole other level where he's like essentially a modern day medieval, where he's like, and the reason that Saturn's important is because he's the god of such and such, and like, and just go on this rabbit hole of like what Virgil was actually communicating there when he said this to Romans who understood all the things that none of us understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's another level of intelligence and understanding for sure.
Yeah, everything's on a spectrum, and like, at least for me, I've been, I don't know if you say blessed or cursed to have been in a lot of rooms where I was kind of that guy to a degree, but the more I get in rooms like really worth being in, I'm like, no, I'm not that guy.
Yeah,
I now see those guys, I know those guys, and I'm not one.
it's actually refreshing too.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah.
oh, thank goodness, like sweet, like, but I bench press more than you, so. No, it's good stuff. All right. Well, we've waited long enough. If somebody's gonna be late, they'll just have to be late.
Oh, look at that. Perfect timing.
Look at him sneaking right in. I don't have my split screen right now, so I got to pull this up on my phone so I can stay on the notes and not drift off into who knows what.
Not drift off into the Sea of Italy.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go. What we're going to do with this one is we're going to sort of run through the narrative, and then we're going to pull out some threads in here and kind of tug on them a little bit. The reason for that is because this is actually not a super long portion of the book, but there's a lot of events stacked in here very tightly together, and there's just not a tremendous amount of color to each of the events. You sort of get snapshots of this thing, and then they move on. So we're going to do sort of the same thing. I will say, if you have trouble tracking, especially chapters like this, where it's like this journey, if you can pull up just on Google or something, a map of Aeneas's venture while he's traveling, it'll show you his Odyssey and the voyage that he takes, along with the names of the towns, and you can see it, and the visual is extremely helpful. So just like right off the bat, use a map. It will give a whole lot more color to this, and you're not just lost in a sea of names where you're like, who is he talking about? I don't even know if is that a person or is that a god or is that a town or like what? I don't know what he's talking about. I definitely understand that. So having a map is extremely helpful. We sort of pick up where they have fled the city of Troy. The city is being completely taken over. The walls are being knocked down. It's just leveled. Right at the end of the previous book, you had the death of Aeneas's wife and her charge to him: never let your love for our son falter. This is your mission now. You have to go plow the seas. You have a kingdom to win, a city to build, and a new bride to go and claim. So she sort of sends him off, and they set sail at the beginning of this one, not really sure exactly where they should go or what they should be doing. They just know they have to leave and go found a new Troy. So they're sort of in this period of exile. And just like always, there's all of this biblical overlap with stories like this. You literally were like, you were in your land and now you've been cast out into exile and you have to go take dominion of this new place. And so there's some confusion and not really sure where to go, what to do, all that. So they leave Troy in search of a new home. Where would destiny take us? Where are we to settle? So that's immediately I think that's interesting about this is that you very rarely hear them like struggle with how they're going to survive. That's not really a question. It's more of like, where are we going to be Trojans? Where's the new Troy going to be? Where are we going to put down roots? So it's not so much about just like their own individualistic survival. It's more about where are we going to go build a civilization? So that's what they're looking for. So they leave. The first place they come to, they have this really strange event happen. Aeneas is pulling up trees by the roots. And when he does this, there begins to be blood oozing from the ground from the roots of these trees. And he's very confused. It's shocking to him. It's sort of jarring, scares him. And what he ends up finding out is that it is actually the burial of a Trojan warrior who was sent out by Priam, who was the king of Troy, with a sum of gold. His goal was to take this gold to a neighboring kingdom who is an ally and have them hold on to it because Troy was under attack. And so what he was trying to do was sort of prepare for the future. If things go badly and the city falls, at least all of our wealth won't be taken by the Greeks and lost. We could send out, the survivors could go to this neighboring kingdom, pick up their resources from there, and then begin to rebuild. And so Priam's already looking forward to this. He sends Polydorus. I think it's Polydorus is his name. He sends him with the sum of gold, and he is betrayed by the king of that kingdom. the king of Thrace is who betrayed him. And so what he actually does is, instead of honoring their friendship, he betrays Priam, kills Polydorus, seizes the gold for himself, and then actually joins his army with Agamemnon's Greeks. So this is the first time Aeneas is learning of all of this. He discovers it and realizes that they can't stay there. Like the land is cursed. It's already set against the Trojans. And so they have to leave, and they travel from there and go to, what's the next place? It's not Crete yet. First, they go to the island of Delos. So met there by friendlies. King, it's almost Aeneas, but it's Aeneas or Aeneas, king of Delos. There they find they're given the prophecy at the temple of Apollo on the island of Delos. And so he explains to them that they have to go retake their actual homeland. So they are from this long lineage, and they must return. We've talked about this before, but they must return to where their forefathers are actually from and reclaim their former homeland as the children of Dardanus. And so they leave there, but instead of going all the way to where they should have gone, which is Italy or Hesperia, anytime you see Hesperia, they're talking about Italy, same land, same people, same place. They leave and they go to Crete, which is where the Cretans are, which is the people that Paul has some pretty terse words for in the New Testament. They go to Crete and they settle there, or they try to anyways. And Alex pointed this out yesterday, but you'll notice that every single place that they go, the first thing that they try to do is like create civilization. They don't go there and just like hide in caves and hope not to die. They go there and they build walls, they build homes, they start plowing the earth. There are weddings that are taking place as soon as they set foot on land. They begin to domesticate everywhere they go. So that happens at Crete, but it doesn't go well. There's famine, there's plague, there's pestilence. People are dying. It doesn't work out. And so they decide that they must have not understood the prophecy correctly, and they're going to go back to the island of Delos. Before they leave, Aeneas is visited by his household gods. The household gods visit him in a dream and reveal the true will of Apollo, which is that the Trojans must go to Hesperia, Italy. This part's really interesting. I don't know if you want to go into now, Alex, the quick details about the Penates, the household gods.
Yeah. So when you see in the references to the household gods, some context there. Each household had a set of household gods, the Penates and the Lares, and each family had their own, and then the nation state of Rome, the Empire of Rome, had also their own with the individual family Penates and Lares, the household gods, underneath them. And it was the part of the founding myth of Rome is that the household gods of Rome were the personal household gods of Anchises, Aeneas, Ascanius, or Ilias. And so they were taken and used as Aeneas is the father of Rome. His household gods became the household gods of the nation.
Really, really interesting. So he found out yesterday that Penates actually meant basically like pantry. And so in a sense, it was like, this was the hearth and home gods. These were the gods of your household. And specifically, for some reason, when we think of a household, when the Romans thought of a household, the thing that they thought of was the kitchen.
Yep.
Like the place where food was stored and prepared and enjoyed. That was the heart of the household. And that was what also defined the household gods. So just interesting piece of sort of old knowledge there that we sort of don't really think about anymore, but you could think of this in the way that, like, if we could apply this ourselves, the heart of your home is the dinner table. And of course, we learn this all the time in like household. Uh, uh, what is the word I'm looking for? Inviting people in
Hospitality.
hospitality. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word. I was thinking of a P word, but it's the wrong one. Hospitality is what we're sort of looking for there, and the general space and focus of hospitality would be the dinner table. And so these things, obviously, there's a ton of overlap and connection there, and it's really, really old world knowledge. It's not some new thing that we're coming up with here. We're actually resorting back to things that are far older and wiser than we are. So,
which seems like almost everything worth, like I just literally everything worth like making note of and keeping track of, like has its roots somewhere well previous to what we would think of as its origin. Like I don't remember the exact quote, but Reagan, for all his faults, had that famous quote about like how the dinner table is like the heart of the nation because it's the heart of the family, or whatever. Basically, like eat dinner with your kids. And like he's not some paragon of American conservatism or virtue. Or I don't know. I'm not supremely pro Reagan, but like even he like is getting at something so much older than what we would assume. Like a lot of people would just kind of be like, oh well, clearly that was something that he said, so that must be kind of where it starts. But it goes so far back that we can hardly even comprehend.
Yeah, 100%. So anyways, we both thought that was a really interesting tidbit there, so we figured we'd relay that. So he gets this revelation in a dream from the household gods. I think it's really interesting here. The household gods appear to Aeneas and not to Anchises. So there's the beginning of this handoff happening here, where the baton is being handed off.
You see in the back part of book 2, it's very clearly a different case, because Aeneas is kind of submitting to Anchises' will. He's like, well, Dad, if you're going to stay here and die, then I'm going to stay here and die too. Like my wife and son will, like, you set the mission, and then we'll do what we're going to do. And now you're starting to kind of see that transition and that shift, which will continue throughout this book.
Yep.
Particular book of the Aeneid.
Yep. So you have the household gods appear to Aeneas. When he wakes up, he reveals this. The very first thing he does, I think this is another interesting point, which is fathers and sons. The very first thing Aeneas does is not go tell his son what he saw. He goes and tells his father. And so they have a conversation about it. And Anchises doesn't do the thing where the old man goes, boy, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just a dream. He goes, I should have seen this. I was warned about it. Someone told me, and I didn't pay attention. So I think that's really important to notice here, is that like Anchises is the pinnacle of virtue, and his son sort of is the one that's taking the reins of that pinnacle of virtue. And you have the man who married the goddess, and then you have their son, who is the son of the goddess, right? Like he's often greeted as son of the goddess. And so you'll see this also in book 5. I think it's book 5, with the funeral games for Anchises, that one of the titles that he has is husband of the goddess. And so you have this shift happening, the baton's being handed off. Anchises is humble enough still at his point in his life, with the amount of prestige that he has, that he still takes his son's word and runs with it. So they leave, and the next place that they land is the land of the Harpies. So these are these basically demons that live on this island. And what they do is they land and they kill some of their cattle. And just like we talked about, they immediately domesticate the place. They have a giant feast. They offer worship. They sit down to a meal. And that's when the Harpies show up and terrorize them. This happens a few times, and they start to try to sort of hide so that the Harpies can't get to them. But without fail, the Harpies find them. And so what they end up doing is they're like, all right, we'll just set a trap and then we'll fight the harpies when they come to try to steal the meal from us. And so they spring this trap, but the harpies take no damage. And so they're literally trying to fight demons with swords, and the demons just basically laughing at them. There's one who is Seleno. Seleno is the name of the most powerful of these harpies or demons. And so she gives this terrible prophecy to Aeneas. It's interesting to look at because technically the prophecy is true, and you'll see this as we move through the rest of the book, but it also is given as this very doomsday type, this will be the end statement. She gives him this as if his life is going to end in sorrow and misery and failure, by unveiling all of the pitfalls and struggles and battles that he'll have to wage and fight, all of the obstacles that are in the way, but she doesn't give any of the upside. And so he gets only this negative picture, which in my opinion, like, I think that's, in some sense, you could very much apply this to Satan. Like, the accuser shows you all of your sin and everything that he said is true. And you go, yes, I am all of those things. And he goes, you deserve hell. And you go, yes, I do. But Christ, like, but you're not giving the whole story. You're not providing me with the entire narrative. And so I think that's interesting to look at there. It might be worth coming back to once you finish the book and reading her prophecy there in this particular section. Because it's an interesting picture of that same dynamic that you see in the Christian life. So from there, they decide, like, all right, we're not going to be able to fight these demons. So they leave. They, at this point, they are fleeing through all of these Greek kingdoms and islands that are still held by the Greeks who had won at Troy. And so they're, in some sense, they're trying to slip through unscathed, right? And so they're fleeing past all these Greek kingdoms, and they end up landing at Actium. Actium is interesting. At that point, the first thing they do, because it's actually a peaceful landing, they're not attacked by demons, they don't have to fight any Greeks, nothing like that. They throw some games, which I think is curious, and we'll expound on that later, because this is one of the pictures and models that sort of inspired us as far as the New Christendom games goes. The first thing that they do is they celebrate by hosting games. So I don't know if you want to talk about that for a minute, Alex. I'm going to close this garage so that this light is not blinding me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so their first reaction to this safe landing is to host this series of overtly masculine physical competition. So they're rejoicing in their safe travels and landing, and the way that they choose to do that is by fighting each other. Essentially, they have all these things that they could do, and they decide it would be awesome to determine which of us is the most superior, and so they wrestle in the style of their fathers, and they celebrate the escape and safe voyage past so many Greek cities. And just kind of compare and contrast that to what our modern response might be in a similar situation. And then you look at sort of the outflowing of that, so we're, kind of trying to recover a bit of that robust overt masculinity and physical culture. Obviously, for the glory of God, overtly in our case. But the desire to compete and to win is not in itself a fallen or bad impulse.
For sure. It's also just a particularly Western thing. Like this book is the embodiment of the Western ethos. This is the roots and grounding and like the seed work of what became the West. And so if we're going to recover this Western greatness and this seeking of Americans' will to exist and not just exist, but win, then you're going to have to recover some of this ethos right here. And so that's kind of some of what we're trying to do there. So figured we'd just throw that out there. We'll talk about it more when we get to book 5. From there, they leave and they have a really interesting encounter. They come across Andromache, who was Hector's wife. Hector was obviously killed by Achilles outside the walls of Troy. He died there. And then also their son, Astyanax, did not make it out. He died in the sack of Troy. And so Andromache was actually taken by Pyrrhus or Neoptolemus, whichever name you're going to use. But Pyrrhus was the son of Achilles. So the next generation of Achilles. And keep that in the back of your mind too, because we're gonna meet another character later who is Achilles, but he's the Achilles of the Aeneid, and he's bad. But anyways, Pyrrhus was sort of the next Achilles, and he took Andromache as sort of like this trophy slave wife and took her back to Greece. However, of course, he's Achilles, and so he doesn't just stay content with having this slave bride of, this the slain warrior from Troy. And so he actually ends up taking another Greek's, I believe it's another Greek's wife. And that man decides to take some revenge and kills him at the altar at some point. And so Andromache is now left with Helenus. Helenus is actually a Trojan who lives in this Greek land. And so she at least, she's obviously, she's not with Hector. She still refers to her in this section, by the way, as Hector's wife. Like that's how she wants to be remembered. When
they come upon her grieving for her late husband. Like that's when they Hector. Find her. Yeah. She's been married to or enslaved, however you want to interpret that. She's been with Pyrrhus, and now she's with Helenus, who is head and shoulders better than Pyrrhus was, but you still like she's grieving for Hector, her first husband.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So there's something here that I do think is interesting. She says something about she was the one, the happiest one of all, Priam's virgin daughter, doomed to die at the enemy's tomb, Achilles under the looming walls of Troy. She says, no captive slave allotted to serve the lust of a conquering hero's bed. Alex brought this up when we first talked about Creusa, saying something to Aeneas as a shade, as her ghost is talking to Aeneas in the end of book 2. She actually rejoices in the fact that she died there in Troy and wouldn't be taken as a slave bride by some Greek. And it's almost like she sees it as a mercy because she knows that will be the case for many of the women of Troy. And so now you're meeting Andromache, who that literally has happened to. And Andromache says the exact same thing. She was the luckiest of us, the one who wasn't taken advantage of this way. It was a glory. It was actually a good thing for her to get to die in her native city among her native people. It was a terrible, tragic thing, but at least she didn't have to endure this. So Alex brought that up previously. I just thought I would throw that back out there because she recognizes it there. After this, you have this meeting between Andromache and Aeneas, and we'll come back to this, but she immediately starts asking about Ascanius, Aeneas's son. Later, after their prolonged stay with Helenus and Andromache, there are a bunch of gifts given. Helenus gives them a bunch of gifts and loads them down with gold and silver and gifts. But Andromache comes out and specifically gives Ascanius, Aeneas's son, particular gifts that she has made with her own hands for him because he reminds her of her son. And she actually details like his face, his stature, his eyes, all of the things that you embody as a Trojan young man of a prince of Troy, reminds her of her son. And so she honors not just Aeneas and Ascanius as like the new Troy, the new founders of Troy that are going forward and going to establish Rome, but also she honors her son and her husband by honoring them. She's like, I'm honoring them through you. And so interesting section there. We can come back to that in a little bit though. After this, I do think it's interesting. We'll pull on this too. When these other Trojans, Hellenists and Andromache, when they build a city, they build a small Troy. It is literally, he calls it a little Troy, and he is struck by the familiarity of the place, and it's nostalgic for him to get to walk through a city that looks like his city. So a people in a place are not detachable. We're not made to just live in this open society way where nothing connects you to anything. There's something particular to you and where you're from, and from the way people talk to the dress that they wear to the architecture that they build buildings with, the art that they produce, the music that they listen to. All of those things are attached to the ethos of a people. And so you can kind of see this here. As the Trojans leave, they carry Troy with them.
There's even a part of Andromache, gifting Ascanius with these gifts and telling him that he looks like her son. Like, he literally looks like her son because they're the same people. Like, the normative course of a people is that they look similar compared to other peoples. So they're, like they literally look the same because they're of the same general genetic stock, the same race. So it gets as close as like literal blood, and then as far ranging as things like art and architecture. But like none of those can you divorce from a people. Like the people in place is one of the preeminent themes in this book. And like we keep kind of circling back to like the medieval versus modern mind and whatnot. And like it's only because of the last even just 100 or so years really that we have to even mention that. Otherwise it'd just be like, yeah, of course, that's completely taken for granted. But the things have changed so much, practically speaking, recently, that it's worth kind of pointing out and pointing out that we view things through a very modern lens, and literally nobody up until very recently would have even thought remotely like we do. So this, like what we're reading here, is like just very normal boilerplate stuff throughout the entirety of human history.
Yeah, literally up until the 1940s.
Basically, yeah.
When up until about 80 years ago, things began to shift. This is what all of our guys are constantly talking about with the post-war consensus. This is what they're discussing. The fact that you're not supposed to have a particular people in a particular place because that's wrong. Obviously, that means you're a bigot. Aeneas would disagree with you. So
can I ask a question along those lines?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this book basically being about them needing to find a new home and them being exiles, and clearly like they're longing for, and they're building off of what they have. So the arc is them being a particular people from a particular place, taking that culture and moving it to another place, right?
Yeah.
And that would align obviously with the continual arc of humanity, and in particularly the West, of moving from the Pilgrims coming to America, and you have like a lot of tribes that kind of descend from that. So like how do we understand like that there are particular places, but then what's more important there is the people themselves, like the lineage, them continuing on their culture.
Yeah. there's something to this as well that is I think we are sort of allergic to in our modern day, which is that they're conquerors. He goes to fight a war for a land, and he's not concerned about someone else getting their fair share of it. He's going to take it. It's his now because the gods have decreed that it's his. And so there's something to this. I think that we are just not we're just very thin skinned about. And at the basis of it is the question, is one culture better than another? Is the Trojan culture better than that of Carthage? Is it better than that of Greece? And so does it have the right to go there and expand that greatness, including to the people that are already there? This is where you actually got in Rome the idea of the Pax Romana, that they would spread the peace of Rome, the government of Rome, the society of Rome. They would extend that because it's better. Not just because they want to beat everyone, but because this genuinely is it's not just better for us, it's better for you. Like, it's better for you to be a slave to Rome than it is to be a barbarian living in a mud hole, right? Like they genuinely believe that. And in many cases, they were correct.
Their roads were better, the ones that people still use today.
Yeah. I mean, their buildings were better. Their concrete was better. Their society was a better society.
Yeah, and you see this continue all the way up through you have the Pax Britannica. The sun never sets from the British Empire. I'm working through the third volume of Edmund Morris's biography of Theodore Roosevelt, and they cover in like the last, like his from when he leaves the presidency till he passes away, and he spends a significant portion of time immediately after he leaves the presidency in Africa and Europe, and in Africa specifically, at this time in the early 1900s, the European nations, primarily Britain, but you have France and Germany, all the Spain to a degree, all the European sort of players have African colonies, and even at this point, it's a hot button topic. Is this okay? Is this right? Like, what should we do? And Roosevelt, being an American, is kind of like seen as this what in some ways should be like an impartial, like, what's your opinion? You don't have a dog in this fight. And he pretty clearly and like, unequivocally is like, well, no, like clearly, like, you can just walk around and see that places under British rule are much, much better off than places that are not under British rule, like in every imaginable sense. So
in Africa, like both of the countries that I spent significant time in, well, three of them actually, Zambia included, they were all the ones that were British colonies. And not only do they like have a great respect and affinity to Westerners, but they're much more open to the gospel. They're much more, their land is more productive, and they don't constantly have as many wars. And the countries that didn't were ones that were, interestingly, some of them, were like Portuguese colonies, or just different European cultures that had a different moral ethic, and that kind of, they didn't progress those tribal peoples in the same way. So kind of what I was kind of getting at is that, or building on this, there's tribalism like of its own. And then there's, so we have the Greek tribes, who unite together, and we have the Trojan tribe, which is more unified as one. We have colonialism, which I think is different. That's like the conquering, the Roman Empire was almost colonial in that sense. And colonialism is a good thing, right? Like they're at the beginning of that civilization, what the Trojans are doing is they're establishing a colony in a new land. And so, yeah, I think like the kind of the key to understanding this post-war consensus thing is what's happening. Is it conquering just because of superiority? Like what poisoned colonialism in the British Empire was that all of a sudden they started embracing Darwinian evolution in their academia, and then they started just saying, oh, well, we're in India and Africa, we have all these colonies because we're literally genetically superior to them, and then God removed his favor and his blessing from that. And so as 100%. In America, the same thing has happened. America went from being like a colonial missionary enterprise. We sent out the most missionaries in history from the Presbyterian, revolution after the American the war for independence. And then when our nation started to have infighting, we had the Civil War. And then after the World Wars, we became, a globalist shill, basically, of a country rather than actually colonizing because what America has is better and it's the right thing to do. And of course, that's the problem with a lot of the modern day support of Israel and Ukraine.
Yeah, for sure. Like you even see this beyond the Britannica thing. You see this all the way to Manifest Destiny. Like we're going to go conquer these literally barbaric tribes that scalp one another and have been doing this for generations. And then peace ensues. Now, were there bad things along the way? Of course. Like I'm not just acting like we're not going to paint with a completely broad brush and act like everything that they did was sanctimonious. But
there's the David Brainerd model, and then there's the Andrew Jackson model. They're different.
And there's also just like if you thought about it this way, if you look at Christopher Columbus's notes to himself, they're full of quotes from scripture about how the world will be settled and brought to Christ. And he was actually going to like found the New Jerusalem. Like that was the idea. Like you were coming to, this was supposed to be Eden. Like that was the idea for America. And so like right from the beginning, we totally have a skewed version of a lot of these explorers and navigators and men that went and sought to colonialize places. But his point, his idea was to bring the gospel. It was to bring light. The thing is that light is not favorable to those that live in darkness. They don't like it. And so, Of course, there was a clash. Of course, like it's not surprising. This is just the way human beings work. We're sinful. And so it's not surprising at all. It's a great question, though. Like, how do we think about how this sort of ethos, because 100% Aeneas is a colonizer. But does that mean he's evil? Like he was a tyrant? No. Otherwise, then we all need to just not exist.
Well, the difference between the colonization and the spread of Christendom compared to that of Islam are night and day, right? Mm-hmm. And you have all these particular peoples who are often displaced. But even when for those of you guys that have read Defenders of the West or listened to that season of the King's Hall, it's like they often refer to certain cities that they try to protect and that in crazy circumstances they do defend. They think of those cities, whether it's Constantinople or in Serbia, I forget what, like they end up thinking of these like fortresses that are basically like the last place name. They're like, that is a representation of like Christendom that we need to protect, that we settled, we created, we developed all this. And it's really linked to the culture that is even among multiple different European nations. They'll constantly like rally each other to go defend this place, even though some are the Franks and some are the Britons. And it's really, it's because what they're offering is far better than what Islam is going to bring to the land, right?
100%.
That was the call of the Crusades.
Right. Okay, so let's get through the next portion of this chapter. When they are about to leave from Helenus and Andromache, Aeneas asked him for advice, for warnings, for basically like a prophecy from the gods. And Helenus is like, I can see only so much. I'll give you as much as I have to give you, and hopefully it's helpful. And he gives him this prophecy. So he takes these warnings into heart, and then they leave from there. What's very interesting is before Aeneas leaves, he talks about uniting his people with those of Helenus and Andromache. And he has this line in there that is just amazing. He says, both of our kindred, both of us, have the same founder, Dardanus, the same fate too. Someday we will make our peoples one Troy in heart and soul. Let this mission challenge our children, which is quite the line. Like this vision is larger than me. I'm just this link in the chain, and hopefully the links that come after me are better and stronger and more beautiful. Right. So you kind of see that there, this generational mission that's really, really cool. After that, they have the encounter with the Cyclops, at which point they pick up one of the crew members from the Odyssey. So this is one of Odysseus's guys from their landing in the Odyssey. He's left there what they had done is they had actually let the giant get hammered drunk, basically, and then like waded into his cave and drilled out his eyeball so he can't see anymore. So they blinded him, but this man got left and stranded on the island, and he's just been scraping by, trying not to get eaten by this giant. And he's like, what? Like, if you guys want to kill me, that's fine. That would be better than staying here. I just don't want to be eaten by this monster. So they don't spend much time there. They take the guy and they leave. I think that's another interesting thing about this colonialism. All of a sudden, they don't shirk this guy and hate him because he's Greek. They have mercy on him. They're like, this is terrible that this happened to you. You can come with us.
Like the one that Priam allowed to live that tricked them with the horse. Yeah, same kind of thing. You could tell that they're compassionate as a people, which is obviously another lesson that we can have, because we can let enemies in out of sheer feminine compassion.
Yes, 100%. Like innocent as doves, wise as serpents. Like, have compassion, absolutely. Have mercy, but don't be a fool. And so Aeneas, but you can see his compassion here for sure. Like, he doesn't just go, all right, well, you were fighting on the other team not too long ago. We're just going to go ahead and kill you and leave. They take him on board. But I think there's something that's implied there that's like, you're a Trojan now.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not a relativist thing where like, oh yeah, come and be a Greek amongst Trojans. It's like, well, when you come with us, you become one of us, or we will kill you. Like,
learn the language, become a citizen, become a new citizen, which is the gospel, right? The gospel is you change, you leave your old nature behind, and you become a new person.
Yes.
And not only that, but like, your arms belong to us now. You fight with us.
Yeah, you're our slave.
When we go to war, you go to war. And so there's all of those implications are embodied here. After this, we see the thing that Robert brought up earlier, which is the thing that I really want to talk about, which is this last section. They leave, and here, after all the blows of sea and storm, I lost my father, my mainstay in every danger and defeat. Spent as I was, you left me here in Chryses, best of fathers, plucked from so many perils, all for nothing. Not even Helenus, filled with dreadful warnings, foresaw such a grief for me. Not even foul Salino. This was my last ordeal, my long journey's end. From here I sailed. God drove me to your shores. So this is when you snap back and realize that he's still telling a story. He's still standing in the throne room at Carthage. He's still standing at the feast in Carthage, telling Dido the story among all the guests. And everyone is sitting wrapped in silence, listening to him weave this tale. And he does such a good job that even you as the reader forget that he's telling a story and forget that this is not first person. And then all of a sudden, something happens that shifts the way he's telling the story. And the thing that happens is his father dies. All of these perils, all of the defeats that they suffer, all of the times that they're set on by demons, they have to fight a cyclops and escape from him. There's times where he finds his countryman has been buried with spears still stuck in him, and he has to give him a proper burial. There's all of this terrible stuff that happens. And then he's able to talk about every bit of that fluently, with flair, with the kind of presentation that draws people in. And then all of a sudden, he gets to the portion of the story that he can't handle. And he retreats within himself. And the story's not over. He doesn't tell them about the winds whipping up and his soldier, his captain, him watching his ship go down to the depths of the ocean, which we saw in book 1. You don't get any of that. You don't get the fleet getting split. You don't get them landing on the shores of Libya. You don't get any of that. You just get, Anchises died. This was my last ordeal, my long journey's end.
And that's all we know about. Like, we saw that in book 1, but like, who knows, like what else happened, how much time passed. I'm probably not years and years, but like there's maybe other things than just that are like would be noteworthy. But he gets to that point and he just can't really, he loses the narrative himself. He's like, he's almost caught up in his own story as he's recounting it, and then he gets to that part, and it kind of snaps him back into himself and into the grief that he's still experiencing.
So I think that is the main thread that I want to pull on here, is Anchises' death and the impact that it has on Aeneas. And how do we think through that as sons first? How do we think through that as fathers preparing our sons? And just asking ourselves, like, have we come to grips with this is a thing that every man has to go through? Is this something that you've thought about? Ben Garrett and I had very similar thought processes on this, and I don't know if you guys are the same way, but I would be interested to hear. I write and speak my father's eulogy in my own head very often. I am, and have for years, been writing what I'm going to have to say. These are Ben's words. What I'm going to have to say when I stand in front of a group of people that think that they loved him. But I loved him. Like, he was my father. And I think you can see that with Aeneas here. I don't know how Virgil was able to pull this out in such an impactful, but yet subtle way. But he shows all of that happening here, where Aeneas gets to the obituary, like he gets to the eulogy of his father, and he just sort of trails off. It's almost like all the power goes out of the engine and it just slowly winds down, and he just retreats within himself. So I'm curious y'all's thoughts on some of that.
I think about that regularly in the sense that I remind myself to stay in touch with and thank my father, appreciate him as often as possible, because you never know what could happen. My family was just in South America, or my parents were just in South America for a month, and they have their affairs in order, but I would hate to be bereft of, like, having said something or really appreciated my dad in the way that I want to. Like, we know that the end is coming. It's not coming soon. My parents, thankfully, have really taken good care of their health, and in a way that they could be great grandparents, but just something could happen and we need to be prepared for that time. And then also, yeah, I want to give my dad the, he's had some really great things said about him in public settings. And so that's a high bar for me to exceed, but I can do it. And I just need to, that means I need to be thinking about and writing down things that I appreciate about him.
Yeah. Alex, anything on that? I know you and I pretty much talked about this yesterday, but
yeah, no, I mean, you guys nailed it. The impetus to physically write things down. In my head, the list is certainly not short, but like, to kind of do a little bit more actual preparation is, wise counsel, I think. And then just kind of, time is short, and it's not, and, Lord willing, many years, but also, who knows tomorrow? Like, we don't know.
you don't know.
So there's just kind of the impetus to, like, the stuff that you've wanted to do and that you should do, whether that be big or small. Do it, and don't just assume that, well, we'll get to that whenever, because it might not be that way. Like, there was no in the Aeneid, there was no real prelude to Anchises' death. Like, it wasn't that we see as the reader. Like, he wasn't sick. He was Aeneas's father, so he was clearly, older, the generation before him, but wasn't particularly old and frail, and then passed away, and we don't really know how exactly either. Like the exact details, we're not privy to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is just one of those things that is baked into the reality of being a human being, is that the thought of trying to live up to the legacy of your father, whether this is in a good manner or a bad one. Say you had my father had not a good father, and was constantly trying to move everything back 180 degrees in the other direction. Like, how do I get this stain off of me so that it doesn't get on my son? And now I'm in a situation where I'm like, how in the world am I going to give my children the same kind of love, but like love in the way that he's given me, where it was the love of extremely high expectations. And not because he thought he was so great and I should be like him, but because he genuinely thought that my potential was beyond the skies. And so the disappointment that ever came was that I didn't live up to myself, not to him. And so, like, how do I give that to my children? How do I translate that and do it better than he did? Like, how do I keep from shortchanging this gift that I was given? It's an extremely daunting task, but one thing I will say is, like, the thought that you would suddenly grow the shoulders that could bear the weight of a burden like your father not being here anymore it's folly. To think that would suddenly happen overnight, to think that you would suddenly be able to bear that burden just because you have to now. Men crumble under things like that. And so if you're not preparing now for this eventual reality, because this is just the way that a fallen world works, death is a scourge and we have to deal with it. And sometimes you have to deal with it personally. And so are you getting ready in some sense? Like, are you making sure that your shoulders are broad enough and that your back is strong enough that when all of the weight finally does fall, physical, metaphorical, financial, spiritual, across the board, are you ready to catch that weight and keep it moving and not let the momentum stop? I think those are just things to be thinking about all the time. And this is where I sort of like almost get frustrated with the, like, man, I'm not very motivated. Like, you've got some,
and that has what to do with it?
Yeah. And you're like, how?
Yeah.
Are you not aware of reality? What are we talking about? Do you understand the weight of responsibility that you have? Just because your last name is whatever your last name is.
Well,
and
most
you
of
have
them
to
don't.
carry, you have to carry that title. Like, you have to earn honor and glory for that name. Like, it's your job now. I'm just not very motivated.
Anybody who's, I mean, all of us who are fathers, especially of boys, like little boys, that's like, one of the top things that they say, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's like, and you really have to, they will grow out of that fast if you keep the pressure on that. And you're like, it doesn't matter. That's not why you're doing it. That's not why. It's like your feelings about what should be done and when you should obey, like none of that matters. And in fact, like just rebuking them for that's not enough, but then actually showing them and teaching them why it's important to do the opposite of what we feel like and to go the extra mile and to do things without being told and asked is really where the gears start clicking and you form a completely different character from the natural state of man.
Yeah. I think that we're all of the age, at least. I think we're all married with kids, but here on this call at least. But we're kind of at that sort of linchpin position in a sense where we like father, son, and then we're both right now. And so, we have duties in both directions. And so to prepare and prepare your sons for that eventual reality, and also to make them a little bit scared of like, how am I going to live up to what dad did, scared in a good way. Maybe scared is not the right word, but just kind of like, man, I really, really got to get it going. Like, like if you're struggling for motivation, sort of like that. Like, now, if you want to sort of live up to my standard, then, you better get after it, motivated or not.
Right.
Like I look at the last just 2 to 3 generations. I don't have like amazing genealogical records. It's something that I, would love to dive deeper into, but just like the my father, grandfather, great grandfather that I know, and just like their very most general stories, like what my great grandfather had to what my dad gave me, like it sometimes keeps me awake at night, like how like I owe it to them to build off that and to beat them in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
In that, I'm like, man, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And that's like, which is a good weight to have on your shoulders, and a good problem to have to solve. But also, like, it's a reality of like, I either do that or I fail. And so just like continuing to build on that and set the bar high while still giving your son the resources to succeed there, and in eventually beating you out in that, like that's super powerful motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also,
if I could, oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to add a couple thoughts because line what is it? I think it's uh, the last line of that section
Mm-hmm.
where it says, "So Aeneas, with all eyes fixed on him alone, the founder of his people." So, like for me,
Hmm.
like I was amazed that it says the word founder, not founders. Like Aeneas is the head right now. And so for me, and I was having this conversation, like, so I have the 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 bastard child title, right? So I have no idea any single father before me. So I get this glorious duty of, okay, well, who are the Pearies? Like who, like that's not even my biological father's last name. That's a totally different family member who I've never met, not a single clue. So now I get to like from the dirt up build it, bear it, and then pass it on. So like there's no lack of, obviously it took fathers for me to get here, but the glory of it is the Lord has decided I get to be the one who breaks the link to the ultimate bad and start paving the way for the ultimate good
Hmm.
and God honoring line. So now like, wow, okay, Jonathan, this is what we're doing. This
Mm-hmm.
is how we're gonna do it.
I think that's extremely important. The last few things that you said there, I think, are absolutely pivotal. And I just to kind of pass some of this down. One of the things that my dad would say all the time when he was trying to encourage me in a particular direction, or when he was trying to dissuade me from something, he would go, because that's who we are, because that's what we do. Or he would go, that's not what we do. And that rings in my head all the time. You look at something and you go, I know that's wrong. And I can hear my dad going, that's not what we do. Like this settling, this halfway thing, this laziness, this entitlement, all of the things that our culture is just completely wrecked with right now. He would go, that's not what we do. And he would look at me and like, well, are you paying attention? Like, are you seeing this? Make sure you're looking out for that, because that's not what we do. And it was just like, it still sticks with me. And so it's one of those things. I think it's extremely useful. I'm going to try to do my best to do it with my sons and daughters, and Lord willing, they'll catch it the way that I caught it. But it's just one of those things I think is pivotal, and it's so simple and it's so not complicated, but it's just sort of like, you're with me. We are the Pearies. This is who we are. That's not who we are. And like being very clear about which way, Western man, are you going that way or are you coming this way? The Pearies, we are going this way. We are not going that way. And being aggressive about it and unapologetic. And like, it's okay if everyone else around you is going, well, those guys are mean. I really don't like it when why are they like, who do they think they are? And my dad would go, we're the Taylors. We're Team Taylor. We don't do that. That's not who we are. And so I think it's just like, it's foundational. It's extremely important. I've got to run. I'm going to make, let's see if I can make someone else the host here.
I'm going to have to shoot off of here pretty shortly as well.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you guys want to grab real quick in the last few minutes, and then we'll wrap it up? Awesome. All right. Well, really appreciate it. This will definitely set us up, especially the portion about his father and the fact that he's just sort of dejected, and you can tell that the grief of it is crushing him. We'll sort of set up what happens in this next chapter, and you can see why things start to go awry. I think because of this situation. So just keep that in the back of your head as you're reading through book 4, and we'll hit that one in 2 weeks.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate y'all.
Good.
Appreciate it, fellas.
Thanks, guys.